Okay, so hello and welcome to Ethereum Classic Community Call number 10 on the 25th of January 2022. ETC Community Calls is a weekly voice chat that happens in the Ethereum Classic Discord server every Tuesday, usually at 1500 hours UTC. The content of these calls is decided by the ETC community. Each week anyone can submit questions and topic suggestions about anything related to ETC in the Community Calls Notes channel on Discord. You can join the Discord channel by visiting ethereumclassic.org/discord. This chat is held in the Community Calls channel. These calls are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and share. This week we have quite a interesting agenda. We've got a few different things to talk about, so let's just flip over to that and quickly go over what we have in store this week. So first, let's just do a quick review of last week's call, which was 009. Where we were graciously joined by Cody Burns. And just as a recap, essentially it seems like the community fund is in safe hands. He doesn't seem worried that they're not going to be able to get the funds if they need it. It's really just a case of finding some mechanism for releasing those funds. And we will, I guess, nicely then segue into the next point about DAOs. But before we do that, did anyone want to comment on last week's discussion with Cody?
Can you just, so I haven't watched that. Can you just recap on what he means by in safe hands? Does that just mean that he's in communication with all of the other multi-sig holders, and they're in agreement on how they're acting as custodians to that fund? I'm sure I can go back and review that, but if you just want to give a little short thing on what he actually said.
Yeah, pretty much that. It's a 3 of 5 multi-sig, and he knows at least 3 of the people, and they are active. So he basically just said he's not worried about losing access. So we just need to figure out how to spend the funds really, and yeah, I think a DAO is what he was thinking as well.
Oh, okay, great. And so, yeah, and that was my question is, did they want to spend the fund with their decision making, or are they trying to send the fund somewhere where, to a system that we've set up, that has the proper checks and balance and transparency built in?
Yep, I think that is the idea. There's also the benefit of doing it this way means that there's less legal liability for those custodians as individuals if it's all done by some community mechanism.
Okay, that's great. And then, do you want to give any sort of background on where the DAO discussion is? As I believe it was you that set up the that DAO repo and maybe has been holding conversations with people. I know that me and you have talked about this type of framework for a little bit, but it's very brief. We haven't had any deep discussions, but we've spoke about it.
Yeah, so the repo you're referring to is github.com/etcdao, which I encourage people to check out. There are some discussions there, mostly about like who's interested in doing this, and just like spitballing ideas about what kind of frameworks to use, like Aragon, or even using the DAO original source code as a sort of gimmick, but probably not the best idea right now. But basically, in very early stages, there's no deep discussion happening yet, and hopefully we can kick things off now that we know that there is potential to fund it by the community fund.
Also, Cody has shared a link to GitHub that is showing the key holders. So you can view there all the key holders. You can see it in community call notes.
Oh, perfect. I didn't see that.
Sorry, and where was that link? Can you just read off who those were for the audio?
Yeah, just a second.
Just in case someone's listening to this later on and doesn't have access to the link. My question would be about the ETC DAO thing. So my understanding with that will be kind of all on chain, and then this will be a protocol DAO? Is that correct? So this will be only related to protocol spending?
No, not necessarily.
Nope.
I think this is a discussion that needs to happen. Basically, there's been no like confirmations or denials about what it should be doing yet. But it seems to me that it should not just be limited to protocol stuff, because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be funded by this kind of thing that would be like really valuable.
Yeah, I think kind of so what I see on this note is I see DAO discussion, Ronan regarding legal DAOs, and then co-op has a question mark. My research into this has been related to a different project, not associated with ETC at all. And so I was looking into legal DAOs in Wyoming. Someone did bring up a note. I had dropped that note, I think, this last week, and someone did bring up a note of, there is a risk there of if you set up like a protocol level DAO, you're restricting yourself to that jurisdiction, which I can see how that could be a problem, because it could be easy to corrupt a small jurisdiction, or use some black money to try to start altering laws in a small state like Wyoming. It's the least populated state in the country.
Could you explain what you mean by protocol DAO?
Okay, so I'm just saying a DAO that's related to adjusting specific like network protocol issues, like the ECIP stuff that we talk about there. When I've spoke with you, I was talking about a DAO in terms of like why I was looking at Wyoming and relating it to ETC was a DAO that was more looking at putting on and I'm sorry, I should you're right, protocols on top of the network, like Uniswap would be a protocol, right? An AMM type of protocol. Those type of things, those aren't necessarily network protocols. So you're not adjusting the network, you're building on top of it. And so I was thinking about it in terms of that when we had our conversation. But I could see how what someone had mentioned was that there was legal risk by having the network being adjusted, or funding going in to the network protocol, and then just having a small jurisdiction like Wyoming that you could use black money to or dark money to adjust the rules and regulations there. So it's just something I hadn't thought of, and I think it's something that we should keep on top of mind if we're gonna register a legal DAO or do anything like that related to network changes. So I hope that made a little sense.
I like, my thought on that would be that any DAO that is launched would not have any sort of authority with regards to network decision making, because that ultimately is down to like miners and the other stakeholders and people that want to run ETC clients. And if the DAO does something that causes a chain split, then well, that's bad, and it doesn't really matter if the DAO says it or not.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with you. I just want to keep that top of mind.
One
especially when we bring in like legal stuff to it. So anyways,
my thoughts as well on the having a legal entity is that probably is definitely useful in some cases, but maybe not that necessary for everything. Like, if it is possible to pay developers to do stuff without requiring any like legal agreements, that would be ideal in a lot of cases. But there are obviously other things that you cannot do that with. So I think it really depends on the scope of the DAO as to whether it needs a legal entity or not.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with how like Gitcoin does that. Just as an example of just something that we've seen in terms of a board. And I should probably go back on this discussion of, so when I look at kind of successful ways that I've seen open source projects get funding, is I really look at Monero. They do kind of like the donation model that failed on ETC. But they do have a nice message board. So I highly recommend we go to and we look at their message board. They have like a community message board, and they have a way to submit proposals. I think there's a lot that we can pull from there, because it's not perfect, but there is some good content in there to build off of. And then I look at Gitcoin in terms of how they were able to set up the bounties, and I think that they do like a submission process, and then you choose the best one, and that's more in line with like some of those like freelance platforms where you post a job and whatever 10 people submit whatever they try to submit to get the bounty for the job, and then you choose the best one, or you can choose like the top 3 or whatever. So I think that Stev, you actually, now that I think about it, you ran a couple Gitcoin proposals for Core, didn't you? For Lab Core?
Yeah, a few proposals and hackathons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you explain how that payout works? What was that setup like?
So I haven't actually used Gitcoin since I last did those, but you basically create a proposal, or you create a whether it's a hackathon or a certain project, you could create that. I'll just say repo, and then you have people that say that they're working on it, and then they have a status to say like they've submitted a they've submitted a project to it, and usually it's linked with like their GitHub or to like a pull request or something. And then if you're proposing something, you provide your payout address, and they provide their receiving address. So it's pretty straightforward because they know where they're going to get paid out from, and you know where to deposit funds to. And I think there's an invoice in between that process, so that let's say there's a bounty and I won that bounty, I can also get an invoice for tax purposes. Or the party that's funding the bounty, if they're generating the Gitcoin invoice, then obviously they can submit that to taxes because I believe depending on your jurisdiction, that could be a tax deductible event for the person proposing the bounty and the person who won the bounty. That's like basically taxable income.
So that's a good point, and that kind of leads into one thing of. Sorry, did I cut?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. That is why I think that you had mentioned that there might not be a need for a legal entity, but in terms of taxes, like the people receiving the bounty likely need to have some sort of tax form, whatever the jurisdiction, to report their income coming in, and it has to be coming from some entity, right? It can't just be, oh, we received money from an unknown source, right? A black hole. So that's likely what we need to think about in terms of the legal stuff for that type of DAO system. And then obviously what I was just mentioning of and getting into was how to actually start building the framework to distribute the funds, and be that pulling from some of the Monero stuff, or pulling from like Gitcoin, how they're doing it, their bounty system. Stev, I do have another question on when you were setting up that bounty. Was there some sort of like deposit the funds ahead of time so everyone knows, like setting it into an escrow account essentially?
When I was on the platform, actually, yeah. So when you provide your funding address, the platform and Gitcoin does check to see if those funds exist, and they do that just to make sure that people who are proposing bounties are actually able to pay out participants.
Yeah, so I definitely think that that's something of we have to think of. There will be like some sort of built-in escrow system, so that the funds do get locked up for the bounties, so that developers can come through, sniff around for bounties that they want, and then and they know they're funded, and they can see it on chain for proper transparency.
Would it
I
not
think if we
make
go,
sense to just use Gitcoin for this? But for the things that are very similar to Gitcoin that require real world entities, then like could we not just do what Stev did in the past and use Gitcoin?
yeah, I think that's a conversation that we really should have. I mean, it's there. I think there might be a problem of like Steph, do you happen to know, did they take like a percentage off of that for providing the bulletin board service? Like,
I don't recall that. I don't recall if they take a percentage off, But I know that when we partnered them back in the day, they integrated ETC support, so you can have your MetaMask and all that, and people participating or people paying out the funds. There should be ETC support already, so it's very probable to use Gitcoin.
Yeah, so I think that that's a great stopgap, Astora, because we would essentially be posting bounties to where the developers already go, which is really good practice. I have a couple friends that are bounty hunters like that, and they essentially just have a list that they check every morning, and they go through and they comb to see uh, hey, is there anything that's in my wheelhouse? Developers these days, they'll specialize in something, and then they'll go and do that on multiple EVMs and look for bounties related to that. So I think that's like who we want to attract is those type of developers. That's how you kind of bring them into the fold. They're experts, in very specialized code. They're deploying it on multiple networks. I think of this one of my friends did I want to say NFTs, brought that to what's Yaz's chain? I think it's Celo or something like that, CELO. I think that he did the bounty for that, and he got paid some bucks to do that, but he had been doing it on a different project, and so those are the type of people we want, because qualified developers don't want to get a job, right? They don't want to get locked into a W-2. They want the freedom to work on whatever the hell they want to work on, and if they're good at something, they go, hey, well, that's easy money. I already learned it. I'm going to go, I'll do that bounty, collect the bounty, put up really good code, let it get reviewed and whatever, and go on my way. That's open source development, and that's what we want. So,
Amen.
Yeah, you agree with that, Ross, as a developer?
As a developer, yes.
Yeah, because
100%.
you don't want to get tied into a team or anything like that. You want to work on what piques your interest, right?
Yeah, that absolutely.
Yeah, and that's how you get good creative code on there. And by creative code, I mean concise, really specialized. Someone's put deep thought into it, and open for peer review. That's the type of stuff we want. I think that's far different than anything that's been proposed. We've had a lot of private, private teams with private funding, working on private projects, all in the background. And I think this path will be far better. And we've seen it work on like Monero, in my opinion, is a great example of that working. And then I think Gitcoin is a really good system. I don't know about the quadratic voting and all that bullshit in terms of governance. So I think we need to talk about the DAO in that sense of how you do voting, who's participating. I know
Right.
we had started into that, and so maybe you want to talk on that a little bit, because I think people get weary when you hear coin votes and all that, because you don't want the centralized capture of that. So.
Yep. So Gitcoin solves the sort of distribution and finding developers side of the procurement tendering process, but deciding what actually is funded is another problem. And this goes back to, how do you seed the authority of the DAO? And like, either you could have a way for people to deposit funds into the DAO in order to get votes, or you have some whitelist of addresses that is considered authorities. On top of that, you could also have some kind of delegation system where people that are not active can say, this guy can take my vote on my behalf for this period of time. And I think a combination of all those things should be considered and used to compose a good governance system. And I think part of the seeding could, in fact, be based on invitations to people that have contributed to Ethereum Classic in the past, that we know have done something and can prove it by signing a message or something from their GitHub account or whatever, or have contributed to these calls in some way. That's one way of doing it. And it seems there's no like perfect solution to seeding authority, but that one at least ensures that it's real people that are not sock puppets. And then, of course, anyone could sort of donate at any point in order to buy votes, but there would not get more or less than a fair share. So basically, the hardest problem, I think, is not distributing, but governance. And it's going to be a long conversation to get to something that's reasonable. The thing is, it's also better to keep things as simple as possible and not overcomplicating it, because as we saw with like coin votes and stuff, they can be quite gameable and don't really work that well in practice in an adversarial system.
The challenge accepted, by the way, because I'm yeah, I'm ready. Just so ready.
Do you have any thoughts on a way to seed authority in this DAO?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was planning on giving like a full on demo on everything. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just waiting, I guess, for my turn.
Okay. I guess now's a good time. I didn't really know, Ross, what you were planning to show this week, so why don't you take the floor?
Can I do a screen share?
Yep, you
Can I
can.
do a screen share? Let's see. Share. Ooh, okay, so I kind of you can see. You can see?
Yeah, one sec. It's loading.
Yeah, I can see you, Ross. I see
All right,
you.
is it steady?
Yeah, it's
All
steady.
right. Okay. So, DAOs, that's what we're talking about. And so the big thing is like the governance, the fair governance of it. Like how can you make it fair? It sound like it went off. Is it still there?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I'm
Okay.
seeing you.
Okay. So yeah, fairness is the big deal. So the big problem is people bribing the system, right? Or buying out votes. So, well, I've taken kind of like a counterintuitive approach to this. You can, I like to compare it to that scene in Ready Player One where he drives backwards in the race. But anyway, so you actually start with something that is considered pretty much a blatant pyramid. Now, I've modified the code around this, and I've got that up too. I mean, I could show code, but yeah, I don't think I should do that. I can explain it here. Basically, the way these governance tokens are generated are based on a loss multiplier and a HODL multiplier, or a holding time multiplier. So the focus of this is you have two structures. You have the pyramid, and then you have the ring. You don't actually want to focus on making money from the pyramid. Your only focus is actually making money from the ring. The only way you get to the ring is with these resolve tokens. And the ring is because what pyramids do, they concentrate money to a center, right? And if the token has generated an inverse of that, that means that you have these tokens on the distributed edge of this pyramid. So the idea is to actually game everybody else on their impulses to get as much share of this ring as possible. So you actually only want to spend literally what you can afford to lose, and actually have that go down as far as possible and hold it as long as you can, and relative to who's holding the contract, and that's how you get more of this ring. And you don't. So I heard there's the idea of having every individual represent a vote. It's very hard to do that in a chaotic system. Like, you have to have a rough system to kind of bring things into some level of focus, because you're never going to have something go from complete noise to being able to discreetly define individuals and take account to each vote. Like this, and this is the way of getting to this, of establishing identity. Am I rambling too much? Any questions so far?
No, just keep talking. I think you're explaining it. Just get through your whole thought for sure. We can always go back and review it. It's on video. So
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can really just show you how jobs are added to the Oracle, I was calling it an Oracle and a DAO. So you can use that as an Oracle for a lot of things, but ultimately, I would say it's a DAO. So, I mean, I could get into a whole demo and show you a small use case here. But yeah, the principle is.
If you do a demo, let's just do it in the context of what we're talking about, which is posting a job and voting on it. Would be, or I guess it would be proposing a job and then voting yes on it or voting no on it, right?
Yeah. So, and this is a job for the Oracle. Yes. Yeah. So a new job the Oracle would be responsible for. Does the philosophy, I guess, make sense a little bit? Where we know the structure of money or the flow of money in the world is already in a pyramid form. Whether it's a scam or it's not, it's all hierarchical and ultimately in a pyramid form. So the whole principle of this contract is to take that form explicitly and tokenize the inverse of it. And that's because it's basically acting against the way the economy behaves.
And what
That's
you mean
supposed
by
to be
that
revolutionary.
is that your vote is worth more the longer you hold. Is that my understanding?
It's your vote is based on the relative holding time here.
Gotcha. Okay. And so it forces people to the longer someone is involved in this oracle, the more trustworthy. It's kind of like meth, I suppose, right? Like the
You
longer.
said it's kind of
Anyways, regardless. Sorry, I'm just going off. But okay, I understand you.
okay. So it's in a sense it's reflects an element of credit and reputation. That's we have in our credit system today, or our financial system today. So you have an aspect of credit and debt. So the debt is the loss multiplier that you get in this contract, and the whole function of this contract, is to just preserve the distribution of the resolve token. I have no idea what that notification could have been. Anyway, so let me just get into this. You buy, okay, and then to get your resolve tokens, you sell. So that's on the other end. So you buy in, and there's a friction fee associated with it. Right now it's 0. I'll go to an account that already has resolve tokens, and I'll just kind of go through like the whole process because right now there are no watchers on the table. I have to. I'll get to that. But yeah, you can back a candidate. You can back yourself, of course, and you would just stake the watcher. I could just reword that to back watcher, but yeah, you can go ahead and confirm. So a watcher can sit, and they have to they sit to the side. There's a round table of watchers that respond to tickets, or there will be once ones get on there. But to the side, you can sit to the side and just get more and more backing. Once you assert yourself to the round table, once we get this confirmation through, once you assert yourself to the round table, then you're active. And there's a number of round seats to the round table, so there's a hard minimum of 7 just as a security element. So a hard minimum of 7, and then the Oracle governs itself after that. So if there's like 15, it'll take the top 15 watchers that assert themselves. So you can see this watcher, which is myself, I have 0.05 of 0.05, and that's how much I've got backing myself. And I can, with my backing, I can assert, and I can have other people back me. This just kind of like, it just compacts the whole delegate thing. I just did that in this contract. I didn't have to, but yeah, I just did it.
Okay. So I do have one question, which is coming to mind, and I just think of EOS and how their delegated proof of stake worked. It was like 21 seats, and then what ended up happening was they started working together, and the delegates started working together, and then they essentially took over the entire process by being corrupt. I think it was a Chinese outfit, and they all just kind of took that over. So in your example, what would prevent me from, like, let's say, how many seats limited by a certain amount by chance in the round?
It is it's not limited. The amount of seats is actually governed by the Oracle itself. There's a hard minimum limit of 7.
Gotcha.
But even if they attempted to collude,
Collude,
that's creating demand for the resolve tokens. In essence, creating demand for resolve tokens, and the market will respond to that demand, inflating the supply of resolve tokens, because the only way to generate them is by sliding the pyramid down.
Yeah, something I was thinking of is what I would do right now if I was going to try to attack would be to, make 100 accounts right now, sit on them for a couple years, get that time built up, and then all of a sudden I have 100 accounts that have a heavyweight vote, and then so I'm just trying to think of ways to break the system. But anyways, I
And
sorry to
you
interrupt.
said 100 years. So in the same way with Bitcoin, in the same with in the same way with Nakamoto consensus, it requires an exponential amount of time and resources to compromise the system. So yes, in the same way that Nakamoto consensus has a weakness, this has a mirrored weakness. Where yes, if you do have an overwhelming amount of resources and time behind those resources, yes, you can compromise the system.
Okay, and I don't want to totally sidetrack off of this, but I just while you were talking, I just had a thought on another way that governance can work. And Astoria, do you happen to remember the SegWit stuff on Bitcoin and Litecoin back in, or anyone else? I guess there are some other people that were around during that time.
Only
But
only as a buzzword. I didn't really understand the technicals at that time.
oh yeah. Well, so for Litecoin, for instance, what was set up was like a little progress of the node, and what you do is you add a little code to the node. I'm signaling on this node. You didn't have to mine; you were just running the node, and it was a vote. So anyone could install, right? Which also brings up, hey, you could run a ton of computers with one, running nodes with signal and kind of skew it. But anyways, that was a way that SegWit adoption went in on Litecoin, and then we ended up, that ended up being the test net, and then it ended up going to Bitcoin afterwards. But that's another way where we could do some sort of signaling on proposals. We were talking about keeping things simple, so I just wanted to throw that in the recording while I had it top of mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's user activated fork.
Yes. The user activated software.
Oh, hi Omni. You join us with a bang.
Yeah. Omni, you
Hi.
got a little background noise. Can you mute that?
Appreciate
Okay,
it.
cool.
Thanks.
Ross, I have a quick question about how does this system integrate with, for example, a pre-existing fund? How do you figure out how people or who should be in any way control of the existing community fund?
Okay, so if hypothetically, right? Hypothetically, definitely. There would be a contract. Well, yeah, definitely a new contract would be made, and small amounts definitely I would say tests, or not tests, but small amounts initially, because that's just what you do. But in that contract, I guess you would release. You could set up for a lot of rules, but you could let's say release $1,000 every week, and then you would have a contract. I mean, yeah, and then that contract would send a request ticket to this system. I can actually show you what a request ticket looks like right here with this job request. So the fundamental or what do you call it, primitive, I guess you could say, request ticket is the Oracle being able to send a request to itself for a new job, or the Oracle contract sending a request to itself.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a time window on that. Approve. So yes, here is where it would be whatever requests describe the amount of money, and then there could be people that have an address and they're saying, hey, look, I want the money, and it could work like that, or there could be a list of addresses that have signed up on a list within the week, and then all associated with a number, and that list would be in this user interface. I can make this actually very flexible. Let me go ahead and approve this so that I'm all within the time ranges in here. So yeah, what's happening here, by the way, is it's a request ticket. You have a response. Make sure you click save. If you have an exception, for whatever reason, there's an exception to the event, then you have that. That's kind of like a built-in error handler. Yeah, just think of like an error handler. Yeah, that's what that is.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is how does this contract, like the initial people that control it, how does that process happen?
Okay, so this is it relies on organic principles. So you have to jumpstart it. really. And the whole point of the story actually is to warm up the Oracle, because everyone's just governing just this story. And just to warm up the Oracle to a good size. That way, you have a fair amount of involvement in this ring of watchers. When you want to take on things that are more serious. So that's how I would get. That's my strategy to elevating this protocol, this DAO, to handling things that are more serious. Because
So for those that
I
don't
want
know,
to keep-
what is the story element?
Okay, so yeah, the story. It is the first use case. It is it's a first use case, just kind of like to show off or demonstrate the capabilities of the DAO. There's another use case I have built, but for wagers. But this is what I want to use to kind of warm up the governance. The story is just like you have the community. Someone like can say, okay, what happens? They go to the forest, and then something happens, right? They see the river, they see the waterfall, whatever, and then they send that request ticket to the DAO. So and the thing is, they don't have to actually go to the DAO, but their request ticket will be handled by the round table of watchers, and that's taking forever. That's taking very okay. Thank you. Yeah. Jesus, I think Bob just pushed that through for me. But anyway, that's that story is just kind of like, I mean, it's a branching story. I think it's a really cool idea. I get a lot of good responses from it, but you can add different choices, and it's just really, it's like brute force exponential branching. So there is that, but every single path is unique. The restrictions is completely limited to the social governance. So what was beautiful about it is you have this whole NFT craze and all that. We could use this DAO to create a list of laws, but we can also, but a more creative way of doing that is actually creating these characters and these stories, having them go through these sagas, and whatever, harden these archetypes and all this stuff. It's just really a way to warm up the whole protocol. But it is actually pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I get a lot of positive response from it. A lot of people want me to integrate it on different chains. I want to, but I'm also exhausted, and I just want to actually just settle on Ethereum Classic and just kind of like grow what I've got solid, and just get the whole stack, nice and smooth, just educational resources, because this thing is actually, it's hard to beat. You're not gonna buy back a whole pyramid scheme against time, because by the time you actually start, you put your bonds in, you've just gotten here, and there's people waiting to dump on you. If you're trying to get these resolve tokens, sure, you can take them, and then you've got to hold your your bonds against the relative, the average holding time before you're even relevant. So it's a hard system to hit, because it's operating on the inverse of the economy. Like, you've got to buy back the inverse of the economy. Yeah. So we've got this ticket going, finalizing on the commit phase. You'll get a ... as it's waiting on the block. Yep.
Just conscious of time here. Was there anything that you wanted to share in terms of links for where people can find out more? And is there like a GitHub repository for this?
So I do have to update the GitHub. I'm not very good with GitHub. I'm hoping that I can connect with people that are much more professional in that way than I am. But so I could go to GitHub right now, and GitHub is like /economist, I think, and then Obelus. Yeah, and then I've got an old form of the contract here. Like, this is a little bit outdated. There's been some slight little things I've touched up, but yeah, you can find it on that GitHub link.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep.
So shall we wrap this demo up? Is there anything you wanted to add finally? And then we can open back up.
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, thanks very much for the presentation on Obelus.veto. Did I get that right?
Yeah, Voto, but that's just about right.
Okay, great.
Appreciate it though. Thanks for the stage time.
Thanks for contributing. Anyone have thoughts on the this approach? My initial impression is that I really like the sort of vesting period approach to try and prevent people from buying in and immediately taking over the whole protocol. It's pretty innovative.
I like the idea of if we do something like that, of really doing it with very small proposals that aren't contentious at all. You know, something very simple. Really try to test stuff out like that. So if that's my concern, is that, you know, it is a bit complex, right? Just as that was explained, and so that's probably where my concern is. I'm sure the code, the code will need review and all that, but just to see how it could be gamified, and if the stakes are low, we can try to break it. Even doing maybe some test proposals on it for a while. But anyways, yeah, very interesting, Rob. Thanks for sharing all those thoughts.
Yeah, I think the story will bring a lot of those challenges too, because people are going to try to break that. So, yeah, and I think that as the NFTs grow in value, because it's the most unique NFT project on any chain. Well, shit, that's just me, but yeah.
Maybe to keep this process as decentralized as possible, it might be worth having multiple DAOs or approaches to solving this problem. That the fund could be funneled to in small amounts incrementally into multiple different places just to see what works. So there's a kind of natural selection approach.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a pretty good thought for sure, of approaching it from multiple angles. And yeah, if we could just mitigate the risk by attacking, by low hanging fruit that is, isn't very contentious, and probably not too complex. And then and yeah, low dollar amounts. So I think that's a smart and wise approach.
Cool. I guess that would also mean we could experiment with not just different on-chain systems like GitHub, sorry, like Aragon DAO or various different frameworks and Ross's implementation, but also different social systems as well, like just having the co-op or some legal entity that does manage stuff. So I think it probably is a mistake to just try and have one solution to this when really multiple would be better. I noticed that Stev in the chat, before we move into SHA3, has said that he's BRB 30 minutes. So I think we should just wait a little bit on that discussion for him to get back. So I think he wanted to take part in that. So I guess now would be a
bullet on AFRI. What's that?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I see a bullet on AFRI. If you want to move to that subject, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I think me and Brola had a discussion about future guests, and one of the awesome guests to have on, ideally before the next hard fork, would be AFRI, who I believe used to be a hard fork coordinator for ETC and many other projects. So as I don't believe he's doing that anymore for ETC, it would be great to pick his brains and share some of that knowledge and wisdom such that we can apply it in a more decentralized way going forward and get that process out there into the public so we can make sure we're not, missing anything.
Yeah, and that's a great topic. As we have a hard fork coming up, is kind of some of the processes that were happening on previous hard forks were quite centralized. I think as we noticed with, I think Dean dropped into the chat maybe a month or a couple months ago, and was talking about how, have you guys contacted all these people? Send them direct messages and all that. And I think we should really try to rethink that communication, that line of communication to mining pools and exchanges. And I think like, as I was thinking about it, it makes sense to have kind of a dashboard or something that's coming out of the GitHub, some sort of site that these large mining pools, these exchanges, they can just go and check like status status.ethereum classic, right? Something like that. Just something simple where you don't have to be on a dev team and like sending direct messages to these these mining pools that a non-contentious hard fork is coming up. It's just they can just check in, right? So I think we really need to work on that. And I think, and my opinion is that I think the website is the best way to do it, and having like a status subdomain, is, so you can just check in what's going on right now. These operators can just do that in part of their Monday tasks or whatever. They know what's coming on the horizon, and that removes a lot of the need for hard fork coordinators and like this centralized hierarchy system that we're thinking of. Just my opinion on that. As we've seen the private teams kind of dissolve over the last couple of years as funding has kind of disappeared for them. Does anyone have any opinion on that?
I definitely think having some kind of dashboard like that would be useful. I don't know whether that would be enough to fully replace the idea of having some level of coordination. And that's kind of why it would be great to have Afri on in the future to really figure out what the pain points are. Because if there is like an emergency hard fork that needs to happen or something goes wrong, you can't really rely on every single exchange and mining pool and wallet developer to be constantly checking a source. And you really need to be able to push out like emergency updates and ideally have some kind of list of contacts to reach out to. And that doesn't necessarily have to be done in a centralized way. It could just be there's an open list of contacts that people can reach out to, and anyone can fill that role. But realistically, that information I don't think is really, like, we don't know what's involved in coordinating that and what can go wrong. So I think it would be really good to get Afri on to figure out what actually needs to exist.
Yeah, I agree with you there. There needs to be some sort of list, and I believe that the teams used to have lists of contacts. I know the co-op had one, and then I remember DFG had one, and LabsCore, whatever you want to call them. But I don't think that they actually shared the list with each other, which was kind of interesting. And also, as the receiving end, just my background was I work for exchanges. On the receiving end, you don't want necessarily the emergency contact line to be public, because then you get all sorts of bizarro things, right? You'll have a bad actor start sending you messages saying, hey, you need to update, to this link, right? And then it's a malice node or something like that. Or it just creates what would it be, hysteria, for something that like, oh, we have a security issue, update immediately, but there's not really nothing there. So we just have to be careful if we're doing those centralized lines. I definitely think that that's extremely helpful. But I do know that like exchanges and probably mining pools don't want their emergency contact lines being open like that. So
yeah, it's a difficult problem, and how to do it in a decentralized way is really difficult. I guess Co-op is the only like publicly known, trustworthy, centralized group that has that level of authority that can ping people. But it could just be there's a community of trusted people with that information that's more private, but has some kind of rotation in a way, in the same way that this the Discord is operated by moderators. It's still pretty decentralized, but still has some level of privileges.
Yeah, and I think having that source of truth, like a status.ethereum classic page, that when you're pinging these people, that's what you're citing, right? It's, hey, this is the project's page there's a security thing. Although, sorry, now that I think about that, if you have a big security bug that you need to rush through, you might not want to advertise it that publicly until you have it fixed. But anyways, yes, it's a problem to solve for sure. So yeah, I think that would be a great discussion with Afri. I think that's smart to start doing. And I think we need to really start thinking about surviving without these teams. So as you're saying, of like co-op right now is the trusted people. They might not have funding in 3 months for all we know. So we just really have to start applying those principles of let's stop relying on people. This stuff has to stand on its own. This network is not a year old anymore. So we have to start making those transitions to truly be decentralized. And it starts with that type of thinking from the foundation.
Absolutely. And if anyone is on Twitter, maybe after this is published onto YouTube, maybe someone could be kind enough to link Afri to this timestamp where we're discussing this. And because I don't have a Twitter account, it'd be great if he could contact one of us on Discord if he's available.
I would also expect that the most important communication is between the client developer teams and their users, since many of the features that we've seen in past hard forks, they didn't really affect anything else. They were essentially internal to the client. So the most important part is updating the client and maybe checking some interfaces or so, but nothing that goes much beyond this. So I think that is the most important channel, and I guess the developer teams can just organize themselves around this. I mean, they probably have contact to their major users anyway, so they could just use these channels. Nevertheless, of course, there should be some general information page where people who may not have established any direct contact for whatever reason, or who are just curious and so on, can also see what's happening.
So what information would be on this page other than just the latest client number?
Well, what the hard fork does, what the status of the client versions is, if they're already, if there's a test version, if there's a production-ready version, if they're still developing, and so on. Possibly contact information for anyone who has questions. Be it specific to the clients, or be it something more general that's on the entire Ethereum Classic level. That's the thing that I would be looking for, and of course references to any ECIPs and such or EIPs, as it may be, that talk about the technical background.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one. Maybe even like a countdown on the blocks. If you wanted to make it nice, like, hey, this is happening at this time. If it's a scheduled change, like what is it, Magneto? What's the name of the new hard fork that's coming out? Magento, Magneto, something like that. Anyways, and I think what we're doing right now, I think the current process is that a blog article is created in the website, and that populates in. So Astora, if we could maybe, like, just as a stopgap there, is just set up that subdomain with status or whatever the subdomain wants to be named, and then it just right now redirects to what hard fork is on the horizon, because we already put, on this block it's happening, these are the changes, here's the discussion. We do have that stuff publicly available. It's just, who's crawling the blog, right? It's like, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I think we need to really advertise it via subdomain or something, and then we just have it redirect to the most relevant article right now. That would be just a quick solution.
I mean, we do also, it's the first thing you see on the landing page, and we can set it up so there's like a little pop-up at the top of the page that links to it.
Yeah, I probably refrain from the pop-up. I think everyone hates pop-ups. So
yeah, that's quite annoying.
I get that. So yeah, and that's why I was thinking kind of a subdomain. And then what I was thinking with the subdomain is that then if we build it out and make it pretty nice, because I know we've talked about like a network monitor. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of in the works, or at least on the table. We could make it much nicer than just a blog article and look a little more professional, like $1 billion network, opposed to just that easy article. But hey, easy for me to say. I'm not the one building it.
Finding it isn't too difficult at the moment. You go to ethereumclassic.org, and on top of the page, well, first entry with content is Mystique hard fork on ETC block, blah 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 blah. So that looks pretty good to me. I mean, if I knew there's a hard fork, but I didn't know where to look for data, then this would be the first thing I try. Or if this doesn't work, then ask on Discord. But definitely the official centralized web page would be the first place to consider, and it's already there. So we don't really need to set up any other system that people have to remember exists, and they consult it maybe twice a year or so. That usually doesn't work so well. So I think just building on what is already there, that should be good.
Another way to do this maybe by upgrading the Node Explorer, upgrading the dashboard so that it can send messages, instant messages to node operators and miners. They already have some data about them, so integrating that wouldn't be that difficult, I imagine.
That sounds like a good idea. The only thing that I remember is the Electrum, I believe. I believe that one, someone figured out how to get into that message system in the Electrum client and then pushed hey, we have an update, and then everyone clicked the link inside the node that was hacked, and then it sent them to a Malice client. So just something to think of. I think it's a great idea, but I think on a security standpoint, we really need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, well, the message could be sent on a token email with some ID, and that will solve the problem.
Okay, well, I was hoping that Stev would be back by now. It is 30 minutes since he said he'd be back, but as there's nothing else to cover in the agenda, and it's been an hour.
Well,
so...
Henry's certainly here. You can get Henry
Yeah.
started talking if we want to talk about anything that Henry's been working on in terms of 1049, since the sock puppets have been spamming the channel daily, it seems like. Deb and his friends. So,
are you there, Henry?
Can you?
Yep, we got you.
Sorry, I'm just getting used to this push to chat. It always keeps blocking me off.
Yeah, no worries. Would you just like to quickly introduce yourself to the audience who might not know your background?
Sure. I'm the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer for Epic Blockchain. Epic Blockchain makes products for cryptocurrency mining and blockchain security. We've done a whole bunch of things, including building FPGA products for various networks. We actually released a production product for Aeon, which is an Equihash product. We're producing a Sicoin miner for the Sicoin network, and we're continuously looking at things for enterprise blockchain because that's our end goal. And along the way, we pick certain cryptocurrencies that we like and work with. We certainly like ETC because ETC represents a great alternative to Ethereum, and we believe it can carry smart contracts forward. The team at Epic really is ex-ATI AMD guys, so we help build the top-selling GPUs, including the Radeon series. And so that's by way of background. Our interest, as I said, in ETC is helping promote the chain in terms of security and whatnot. We've done some contributions to the community, including building some GPU miners for SHA3. So, that's our participation's been tough because we haven't been able to grasp other issues. So anything related to security mining, software infrastructure in that respect, we're happy to help with. So that's a quick background.
Henry, can you explain, how did you guys get involved in that SHA3 project? Were you approached by someone, or how did that even happen? And was that how you guys got involved in ETC? I'm just not familiar how you guys got wrapped up in that proposal.
Well, how we got involved was, we looked at, a couple of reasons, right? Number one, we looked at chains that were interesting. So, We looked at with the pending proof of work fork on Ethereum. We thought that ETC needed some help, so we decided to jump in that respect. The other way we looked at projects was to see, financially what people would be interested in. So we just picked the top 15 coins and we got involved in it. So our two favorite picks were Grin and ETC. And they were both GPU friendly and ASIC trending, if I can use those terms.
All very interesting. What are your thoughts on switching to SHA3 on ETC?
Henry, if you're talking, I can't hear you. You might be doing the push to talk thing.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I wrote an article in Medium about 2 years ago, going through the mechanics of the fork. The hash rate's gone up, but it hasn't fundamentally changed. We believe that it's the law of big numbers, right? So fundamentally, if the change to proof of stake happens, then all GPU networks become insecure. I talked to Reuven from, I guess, what was his? He's now known as Fiero. They changed their name, but they're another GPU coin, and they have the same issues. I talked to the Grin guys, and from that respect, trying to understand the system security issues around forks. But the overwhelming problem with ETH hash is that there's tons of GPUs available on the network, and none of them are going to be profitable in a fork. So if I look at the whole funds available on ETC versus all the funds available on the other GPU networks, they're a fraction of what's available on what you can earn today. So as a result, what will happen is that a lot of the GPUs and ASICs on the network will fall away. And based on the size of the network, there's a strong impetus to attack. And I can go over some of the numbers. I'm just prepping some of the numbers so that the community has a valid assumption, valid scenarios they can look at and make the decisions on what's the best way to go for system security.
So I assume your belief then would be it's in the interest for ETC to switch to SHA3 before Ethereum mainnet switches to proof of stake. Is that your position?
Yes, that's my definite opinion. So you don't have the benefit of some of the pair numbers I'm working through right now, but if you look at the probability of an attack, it'll take maybe 22,000 A10 Pros, which is the InnoSilicon ASIC miner, and the 22,000 to operate those 22,000 miners will take $1,000 an hour.
So these are ASIC Ethash miners?
That's correct. They're the ones that are the most prone to attack because they have no other homes in the future, right? You can argue that the GPU can be repurposed, but I'll show you numbers that show, the overpopulation of GPUs is running a factor of about 5 to 1, right? So there's 5 times more GPUs than any of the other GPU networks can absorb.
Do you know roughly what percentage of the market is ASICs at the moment in terms of hash rate?
I wish I had that number, but we can take a rough guess based on the growth of the. I'll present some of those scenario analysis when, in a couple of weeks. I just got to work through the numbers so that the community has a good, grasp of the numbers. But if you assume, I can assume that maybe 20% of the network, and that already shows the vulnerabilities in the network. You can look at the monstrous growth in hash rate and say, how can the network grow from 300 terahashes to 900 terahashes in a year? You can't do that through GPUs. And the scenarios, we can prove that scenario by looking at the supply of memories and the supply of leading edge ASICs out there. We all know that there's global shortage on the process technologies, and so there's a resulting shortage in memory. for GPUs to grow in hash rate, you got to aggregate the combination of availability in ASICs and availability of memory. So, it's my guess that a large part of the growth in the last year has been in ASICs.
If you look at the Ethereum network hash rate, the 1 year statistics, 1 year graphs, then you see basically a linear increase, just with a little bump when there was the crypto mining crackdown in China. Things dropped a bit, but before this and after this, it's essentially a linear growth, which indeed suggests that this is mostly made up of ASICs, probably by the ASICs by the large companies that don't even enter the open market, so they're self-mining basically with their production, and this linear growth essentially indicates that, it's consistent with them just deploying ASICs as they come out of the production process. So you don't see any things like a plateau, like you see on ETC, because these miners that are coming out of the factories now, they're all capable of mining Ethereum and it's more profitable, so they all go to Ethereum and not to ETC at the moment. And you don't see any sharp rises or so, which would indicate some boom on GPUs or so, on things that are quickly available. And of course, everything is also being slowed down by the chip prices and so on. But essentially, this means that there's a very large number of ASICs. And for ASICs, it doesn't really make that much sense to attack the last coin where they can be profitable. Because in the long run, they will survive because they are power efficient. And they're much more power efficient than older GPUs, especially. Basically, the best GPUs, they can more or less keep up with moderately efficient ASICs. ASICs with the highest efficiency, they do better than this. So the ASICs are in a good position. They will obviously also suffer from this flood of hash rate that will go into Ethereum Classic and all the other coins, of course. And but they're in a good position to survive this. So it doesn't really make sense for them to start attacking Ethereum Classic, because that will be the best bets in the long run. And also anyone who has a lot of mining rigs has made a substantial investment. So this is completely different from the attacks that we saw in 2020, where people just rented hash rate, but they didn't really put any equipment on the network. They made no long-term investments. They just bought something, used it, and they were done. So that's a very different scenario. So I don't really think that we have to worry much about ASIC farms attacking Ethereum Classic and also GPU farms. As soon as you have a farm, essentially you are a brick and mortar player, and you're also a bit careful about getting involved with something that it would be criminal activities. If you use your 51% attacks for double spending and so on, then you're definitely on the bad side of the law. And you have a big farm. They know where they can find you. So that's not really a scenario that makes a lot of sense. Maybe there will be some crazies who try something, but they wouldn't have the numbers. And also they might pick easier targets. If Ethereum Classic now has a substantial hash rate, so the bar of entry for any attacker is higher. And it has MES, where nobody can be quite sure that they will be able to defeat it. And there are many other coins that are smaller, much easier to attack with local resources. You don't need a global conspiracy to combine hundreds of terahashes to attack the coin, but you just need maybe 1 terahash or even less. And that may be something that you can even master with a single farm or a small group of farms. So there's I'm not trying to give advice to the criminals out there, but that would be much more attractive targets because it's lower risk. They are less eyes focused on this, and them often also their protection mechanisms aren't that evolved. So that's far more likely. So I don't think this is a really threatening scenario in the end. If you consider what
Henry, could I just direct this to Henry, and could you unpack how you see this attack playing out in your mind?
Sure.
And good points, Warner. I mean, that's where I kind of lose a lot of the logic here. Is I just say, couldn't these people attack already? If you're painting the scenario, they're not attacking any of these small coins. They could just do it tomorrow. They could be running it right now. So I just don't understand this doomsday scenario that Henry's kind of painting. So please,
let's
Henry,
get him to explain.
Can you please like answer this and kind of go into detail how you see this attack unfolding and why it would happen?
Sure, I'll be glad to. So there's no other coin to go to, right? These ASICs are basically hard coded to ETC hash and ETH hash. So that scenario of alternative earnings doesn't hold.
I'm not talking about alternative earnings. I'm talking about long-term earnings because, I mean, first of all, there will be a lot of hash rate, which will make mining for possibly everyone non-profitable. But this will clean out the weaker players, and eventually mining will become profitable, inevitably. Because if it's not, then people just don't mine. Maybe they're selling off their equipment. Maybe they're mothballing their farms. There are plenty of options, and then the remaining players will continue until either until they run out of money if it's not profitable, or until it works again. So this will stabilize on its own, and after that, as soon as basically a break even equilibrium has been reached. After that, if by the value of ETC, mining returns of ETC increase, which generally we can expect to happen because that's essentially what's happening in the crypto market has been happening for the longest time.
Guys,
then they will, with the equipment, they will be able to mine again profitably. So it doesn't really make sense for them to destroy ETC on the first sign of trouble. I mean, there's so many other small coins that could also be attacked right now, and nobody does it.
Could we just, Henry, could you just like outline step by step how you foresee the incentive mechanisms working in why these various different stakeholders, different miners, different ASIC or GPU miners would, after the merge, feel like attacking ETC would be the best option? How does the economics of it work, and just in detail?
You're muted if you're trying to talk. Might be the push talk thing.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So you kind of caught me off guard because I'm scrolling around looking at numbers, trying to punch stuff in. So let me give you a couple of incentives. I want to present numbers so that this becomes not an emotional discussion, but a very factual discussion. I think Warner brings some great points and Ronan brings some great points, but the numbers don't back up the assumptions. So let me throw out a couple of numbers for you. So top five GPU coins represent at today's price about 150 million proof of work, right? ETC represents about 100 million proof of work. This is based on F2 pool numbers. I just take the daily proof of work, multiply by 365, and that's kind of the mining rewards you get. You can just, do some high-level analysis and say, here's the GPU population, divide by X, and you get some profitability numbers. And the profitability numbers are basically what I use to calculate the network potential and probability to attack. So I think, you don't have the benefit numbers, and I don't have all the numbers prepared because I'm not fully prepped to have discussion, but glad to have it in the future and show you so the community can make these decisions. I'll make a couple points that the numbers will support, is that if we believe that the network is probably 15% ASICs, then GPUs won't continue to survive on the network. I think anything more than that, ASICs may attack. We just can't tell exactly what's going to happen on ASICs that are nearing end of life, right? It's your affinity to protect the network versus your affinity to get some profits. So that's I can't speak to the motivation. I have to work the numbers and show you where I think.
On that point, you're saying GPUs wouldn't survive, but we're seeing it happen on Ethereum right now on ETH. So I'm just having a tough time following your logic when empirical evidence is completely contrary to what you're presenting here. And so it's not emotional. We have a real use case that has a ton of monetary value on it that, these guys could be attacking ETH right now with what you're describing. All of these people will be coming to ETC, which is a parity network, protocol parity. So I'm just I just wanted to cut in there because, as you go through these points, it's just, we have to have logic when we're talking about this, and just spouting out a bunch of numbers doesn't really follow the logic of what we're seeing in the market right now. So Henry, it's not emotional. No, we're not emotional here on the people that aren't understanding your logic. We're trying to follow your logic, and it breaks down when you say, hey, these ASICs are bad actors that are going to come to ETC and kill it. When we're not seeing them kill Ethereum, and you're saying GPUs will be obsolete, it'll only be ASIC. And then we're not seeing that on Ethereum. And then also the solution is, hey, these ASICs on ETH hash are dangerous and problematic to you guys, will kill the network. So please come and join our ASIC farm, right? Let us take over your whole network. So that's where kind of the logic really breaks down in your, not only the doomsday scenario that you're painting, but also your solution is to go to an ASIC that is far less developed than ETH hash ASICs, I would say. And you do have financial incentive for the network to go there. So let's just, we have to be talking straight on that stuff. The doomsday scenario just doesn't logically make sense to what we're seeing with the empirical evidence. Sorry to cut you off. Please continue.
No problem. Thanks for the question. So I guess so I do have a vested interest. You have a vested interest. So that's
yes,
everyone in the community.
I don't say that us having vested interest is a negative thing. Everyone, that's how these markets work. Everyone has a vested interest.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this call, right?
Exactly.
So I just the solution, you do have a vested interest on the solution you're proposing. It's just clear the air on that. It doesn't mean that it's a negative thing. Just right. We need to be clear.
Right. So, with that in mind, the reason that the ETH network survives with ASICs is ASICs are not an overall proportion of the network, right? But if we just map an A10 Pro to the Ethereum network.
You muted again, Henry.
Yeah, push to talk, Henry. You just cut off when you said the A1 over to the ETC network.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So, if you just look at the overall network hash rate on ETC, and we say that if A10s were to come over, it would take 46,000 A10s to be equivalent to the network.
Why would it be a bad thing if 100% of Ethash miners were ASICs on ETC?
It is, the network on ASICs in that respect is highly concentrated because it's a very established network, right? The difference on new networks is that you've got the ability to propagate the network with newer players or players that are making new capital. So it's in business, this is what we call fully depreciated assets versus new assets. A10 Pros have more than paid for themselves. They've been available since
we're all in business
end of 2019.
And would it be more or less? Why would it be less centralized on SHA3?
Because it's starting from scratch.
How do we know?
Well, you look at the parallel SHA-3 networks, and no one has any hash rate on that, right? So, the closest one we've seen is, I can't even remember the name of the coin. There was a couple of SHA-3 coins that are, have FPGAs on them. I did some calculations on it. I have to dig up to see what this analysis was, and they were fairly distributed. It's hard for FPGAs to overwhelm a network.
There is a concept of secret ASICs, which I believe Grin was designed to try and mitigate by having this phased approach to switching.
Correct.
Could you speak on the potential of there being SHA-3 ASICs already manufactured, just waiting for ETC to switch?
I can't. It takes tens of millions of dollars to develop an ASIC. So you can argue that yeah, you could do it in a smaller process, so it might be cheaper. So someone has to put their neck out on the line to develop these ASICs, and it'd be tough. I think it'd be tough for a small company to do it, and be tough for a big company to do it. With the ASIC, with the supply constraints in semiconductors, why would you take your precious resources and put them in a high-risk product that is not, that's not been approved versus an existing market? You can get much better returns taking your 16 nanometer ASIC and producing more Litecoin products with it, and mining Doge and Litecoin.
Okay, and just on that path of logic, why would a billion-dollar network go and rely on all of its security to this little undeveloped market when it already has been running on ETC hash and those mechanics on the mining side? And you're talking about, a ton of hash rate coming over from a different network when it moves away. So you're talking about far more security. It may take it may be a bumpy road because you're going to see difficulty changes and all those mechanics. And you know what we'll see speculation and price appreciation on ETC. Break even for miners will require that ETC goes up in value. We see those same mechanics on Bitcoin every 4 years when everything drops out, when the reward halves. So just think about that. And you're talking about someone investing in the ASIC. Well, think about the network as a whole. You have a ton of financial value on top of it. Why would that big investment move over to a security system that isn't developed at all? And I think that point goes into, why wouldn't SHA3 and this project just fire up on a new EVM and develop that market? If you think in 10 or 15 years this network should go into that, why wouldn't you just start a new EVM? You will capture the emission. You get to set all your rules. You can probably fund that entire project on that EVM if there's real value. You'll do the fly clients. You can do all that, develop all that tech. And if all of that stuff develops on a new chain, while you're making money doing it on that new chain and adding value to that tech line, then you have a developed proposal coming over to ETC in 10 or 15 years or whatever it takes. And you go, look, this is an established network. You guys want to migrate over here? Far less contentious. And you're offering something that could be as secure as what we currently have right now. Right now, you guys are offering something that's far less secure and trying to sell it as there's a doomsday scenario. You have to go to this less secure thing ASAP. It just doesn't make sense on that. So, in terms of the financial value that you're putting at risk, I think just go back to the drawing board on that and just think about it, because that's one thing that I just cannot wrap my head around about this proposal.
Well, that's an easy one to answer. So, why don't you develop something from scratch? Same way that companies don't develop things from scratch, right? It's far too risky. It takes time. You look at, something I was involved in, and you look at AMD. AMD bought ATI to get into the GPU business, right? They want to diversify and develop new markets and then integrate some new technology. Well, AMD could have built a GPU, but fact of the matter was that it would have taken them 10 years to develop a viable GPU and be competitive in the market. So they spent $5.5 billion on ATI. So, So that answers the first question. It's really a time to market and overall cost issue. Second question
That's
is
from your perspective, but why does it make sense for the network to go down that
let,
route?
let me answer.
Okay, sorry to.
So from the standpoint of, to transition, why does the network care? The network doesn't really care whether the new algorithm, as long as the players are going to be loyal and work themselves out, it'll work out. So SHA3 is good from that standpoint because it sets a new bar, and that new bar can be addressed by both GPUs, FPGAs, and ASICs. And I wrote that in my Medium article. I said, here's how much it supports. And because, I'm not going to go through the numbers there. I'll prepare a different presentation for a full discussion of some of these, some of our points if we want to have all the numbers in front of us.
On that note, I don't think anyone
let me finish. So from that standpoint, the current infrastructure on GPUs can move easily to SHA-3. And, you get rid of all the ASIC bad actors that could attack, okay? Because they no longer have they don't have a vested interest. They're fully depreciated. And, when you work the break-even numbers, I think you'll see what will happen is that there's far too many ASICs in the network because of the fact that, there is I can't remember the proof of work number, but I think it's like $1.5 billion worth of mining rewards on Ethereum today. So there was a lot of money chasing Ethereum because the proof of work on ETH is a lot smaller, or sorry, not ETH on ETC is a lot smaller. There's less motivation for people to jump in with these big amounts of money for ASICs. And the new ASICs that come in will be loyal to the network. So I think you're going to see a transition point where it's FPGAs, GPUs, and ASICs ramping up. And I don't think you're going to see ASICs pop up for another year, another 9 months to 15 months. So from that standpoint, you'll get a smooth transition because it's not a hard fork where everybody, you have to switch over to ASICs right away. You've got this transition with FPGAs and GPUs.
When the SHA-3 ASICs do come to market, is there not going to be the same problem of there being like a distribution monopoly? And is it not that Ethash ASICs have less of that problem?
Can I make a comment as like someone on the outside
Henry,
looking in?
Sure, go ahead, Ross.
I don't know. Maybe we can keep a tally on how often we discuss hash. I think it's something that's plagued ETC. The back and forth of the hash debate. Is that accurate? Because I don't see this anywhere else.
Yeah, I think other chains have looked at it differently. So, other chains have looked at this and said, we're going to fork before this happens. So, let's draw the examples of various chains that have fears of ASICs and then forked. So they operate differently. The chains that have moved away from, ASICs like Ravencoin, like Monero, I'll have to look at the list. They forked because they saw substantial growth in hash rate. And coupled with that substantial growth in hash rate, they changed the algorithm. The difference in those communities is that they tended to be run by the foundation. So they managed to stay ahead mostly of the attacks. I think the difference on ETC is that we see ETC get attacked a couple of times. And Ross, I think that's why you're seeing the hypersensitivity on, attacks. You had a second question. I can't remember what that was.
No, I was just saying that really we just keep having this discussion about hashing power, and it's a blur to me because I'm on the smart contract side really only, and all the numbers as far as who owns how much hashing power and what type of hashing power it is, it's a lot of noise to me. And then I also think can we trump this whole debate? Let me ask this: can we trump this whole debate by incentivizing a lot of hashing power to come in as it stands? Like if we did have something powerfully innovative that would invite or incentivize miners to come, could that trump this whole debate? I mean, yes, it would be something exceptional because we're looking at ETH, which is like 38 times the hashing power, but I mean, anything is profitable, or anything upwards is a good thing.
I think that's a great thought. The issue is that it's such a big number. It's hard to incentivize the miners to remain on the network, right? They got to pay for power, and it's an opportunity cost of mining. So I think the numbers will show that if the GPU population grew by 7x, then all the GPUs will be unprofitable on ETC, that is. So we're going from I need to convert to equivalent numbers so that if you say the network is primarily old Radeon 470s, there's about 700,000 GPUs on today's ETC network. If that grew to maybe 5 million, then they would all be unprofitable. But if we look at this in terms of ETC number or ETH numbers, there's I think 30 million of those on the network. So it's a game of size. And if the networks were more comparable, then what you're saying could work. Again, to put it another way, for ETC to be comparable to ETH, you'd have to grow the network in terms of price by 38x or 40x or whatever the delta is to make mining equivalent. As it is, it'd still have to grow 7x to support a reasonable amount of GPUs. So that's kind of sensitivities you're playing with.
Could I jump in
slightly
for
different numbers? Go ahead.
I wanted to touch on that question I raised earlier about the monopoly of distribution of ASICs and why there will eventually be a monopoly of SHA3 ASICs at some point, which will centralize the network. And why is it that the SHA3 monopoly is going to be different to the one that would be for Ethash ASICs? And surely it's a better situation in the Ethash ASIC market because it's had time to develop, so there's less of a monopoly. You're on mute again.
Sorry,
No worries.
So why it's not good is that, or at least on Ethash ASICs, is there's a massive overpopulation of ASICs, right? So none of the ASICs are profitable. So that means you have to recover your investment. You can either turn them off, or you can attack, or sell them for scrap metal. In terms of a new network coming in, there's economic theory where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. People look at the network and say, I'm going to bring in so many ASICs. And we're not going to see this massive ramp right away because there is FPGAs out there and there are GPUs out there. So you kind of normalize each other, and maybe for another year and a half, ASICs start to gain the majority of the network. But the ASICs will become, I think, more loyal because they're new investment, right? So if you've sunk in, pick a number, right? Let's say marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So if you sunk $100 million into the network, which is, what the proof of work is roughly today, you're not going to attack yourself.
Right. But then why is ASICs coming to ETC a problem?
So that's a new ASIC investment. On an old investment, you've got too many ASICs. So the number of ASICs out there is you've got I'm trying to eyeball the number. So it's going to vary depending on your ASIC population assumptions. But I think you've got 4 or 5 times as many ASICs as profitable in the network. So those ASICs have to make a decision on what's going to happen. Do you make a last stand like Custard, or do you turn yourself off?
So the question is basically, if there is only one supplier of SHA3 ASICs, how can the price be fair for the equipment? Unmute.
Okay, sorry. So that's an easy one to answer. It's called opportunity cost operation, right? Your main input, your two main costs of mining are the cost of the miners itself and the cost of electricity. So, you're going to look at this both ways, and you're going to say, why can I get this best return on my capex, which is how much I'm spending on the miner, and what's my best return on the cost of operation. So you can't overprice the ASICs because your cost of operation, your price of power is relatively constant. You're going to look at this and say, I can make so much buying Bitcoin miners and my cost of operation is this, or I can look at SHA3 ASICs and my cost of operation is. So it kind of normalizes itself with competition, amongst players. I don't think that it'll just be one ASIC vendor coming out. There'll be several ASIC vendors coming out. And then, people will look at it in terms of power. Good example of this will be let's take a small comparable network, Siacoin. So I make a miner for Siacoin, IB-Link makes a miner for Siacoin, and who's the other one? Goldshell makes a miner for Siacoin. Small network, I think it's about $20 million proof of work, but it supports 3 miners. So, ETC is multiple times that size. By and large, the Siacoin network is all new miners. We're selling product, the other people are selling product. You see the hash rate grow, but you see the hash rate growing in a controlled fashion, and you see the miners being very loyal to the network. So, so that's one where I think is a pretty good comparable. ETC has a lot more incentive because, you're 5 times the size of the Siacoin network. So, to answer your question is you've got 3 miners, you got 3 ASIC rigs available over that network. It forked in, I think, 2019, and it went from 1 ASIC vendor to 4 ASIC vendors. It went from 1 ASIC vendor to 2 ASIC vendors in the course of 1.5 years, and went to 3 ASIC vendors in 3 years, and then 4 ASIC vendors in 4 years, plus or minus 6 months in those numbers.
Yes, but but what you are saying is that you see a future where more manufacturers are gonna build ASICs for SHA3, but not today, not tomorrow, So basically, who will want to invest money and buy the ASICs will have only one supplier this year or maybe next year, and maybe wait to see if competition appears. So why risk the security we have now with ASICs at our front door? They are there. I can even see them, right? So why risk or why assume that more manufacturers will provide equipment?
Okay. Why? So let's answer your second question. Let's answer your first question first, which is current ASICs on the network. The current ASICs on the network will all be unprofitable in ETC. The numbers will just show you that. And really, the sensitivity is how many ASICs do you believe are out there? When they're unprofitable, there's only 2 things that can happen, right? They turn off or they attack. They can't continue to support the network because some of them have to turn off. So we can play the scenario analysis and say maybe that will happen. Second question about what's the incentive? When you fork, people see a motivation profitability, and you support the network in the near term with GPUs and FPGAs, and that transitions to ASICs. And I think the new players coming in ASIC will be loyal because the spend will be proportional to what the earnings capabilities of the network will be. And I just use Siacoin as an example, right? As the network grew, more vendors came in. And
sorry to jump in, but why would all the ASICs become unprofitable on Ethash? Surely the modern ones would remain profitable. The more efficient ones remain.
The problem is there's too many ASICs on the network. So again, I'll have to give you the numbers so we're all talking the same language.
But would
Right,
it not
but
just
as I
be the
said-
inefficient ones that drop off, and the very efficient ones are profitable, but the rest are not?
No, it's the numbers are overwhelmingly small in terms of hitting, unprofitability. So, right now there's about 45 to 50,000 if you just take 45 or 50,000, let's use 50,000 A10s coming over from ETH to ETC, that already gives you 100% of the hash rate. So that's 51% right there. And if we map the rest of the numbers over, it doesn't look good. I don't have that number in front of me. I have to do some mental calculations. But it's an overpopulation basis, right?
Okay, but
the ASIC is going to starve.
That might be the case, but the option of doing 51% attacks in some way does not come without risk. First, there's the electricity cost that you have to pay up front, which is a downside. There's also the risk of it not working out. And there's also no guarantee that it will work, because exchanges can just increase their confirmation times. And there are methods to mitigate the effectiveness of 51% attacks. And also they're considered illegal. So in many jurisdictions, so there's a legal risk as well. So how could ASIC miners justify using them for that, as opposed to either just turning off or mining and speculating on ETC, honestly?
I would like to add one more point to this. This is also that in order to make such a massive attack, then you also need to coordinate among farms. It's not just possible with a single farm. You need basically a network of collaborating, attacking miners.
Henry?
Yes, sorry, Warner, I agree with you on that last point. Coordination needs to happen, but the ASICs are so overwhelmingly strong that it doesn't take many ASICs to attack the network. Isaac, to address your question about the cost of an attack, I think you're looking at to run 50,000 A10 Pros, you're looking at $1,000 an hour. So if you already have the ASICs, it's not a huge spend. That's based on 5 cents per hour. In terms of how do you make money, I don't believe that it's the double spend that makes the money. It's basically disruption of service and what Wall Street, basically shorting, right? So you can manipulate currencies in other ways through, with attacks. And, I don't know the full mechanics of shorting a cryptocurrency, but it's in typical financial instruments. You would short a product expecting prices to go down and make money based on the delta. And then you could also manipulate the other way, which is, force the price down, buy at the low price. That's called front running, and then buying, selling it at a higher price. So there are all kinds of new ways to manipulate.
That requires even more risk, though. That requires an upfront capital. Yeah,
Can I chime in here? So there was already the 4 successful network attacks that happened, and I worked with security intelligence contractors around some of those attacks and exchanges, and was on those delisting calls, and BTC was thankfully not delisted. The incentive was there for 51% attacks, and the previous attackers were ultra messy. It wasn't as coordinated as people might think. They were able to get the hardware somehow, but as far as everything else, it was pretty messy. And they were able to double spend millions of dollars worth on multiple exchanges. And some exchanges would not tell you that because they don't want to reveal that to their customers. So whatever the recorded damages, it's probably more from those previous 51% attacks. And so when you say, like, what was the incentive there and was it hard? Sure, it might be a little difficult, but it's already been done multiple times. That would be my concern is you could say, oh, it's, incentives not there, or it seems really difficult to coordinate, but I could tell you it's already been done successfully on ETC a few times.
A bit of a curveball response to that would be, do you think it's worth pushing SHA3 before the merge, knowing that it's likely to cause a chain split?
So I wouldn't say likely to cause a chain split. This is where you have to get in a deep conversation of SHA3. And I'm sorry, I came in later and I had to come back in the conversation. So I apologize if I say anything redundant. But it's basic proof of work 101. When you're a minority chain, the security guarantees of proof of work are not going to be in your favor. And when Ethereum was first launched, there was design implementations of the proof of work that were not for a proof of work vision, such as Dagger Hashimoto, you have the Ice Age. All of this stuff was for a proof of stake vision, which actually, that vision failed. That's why they're building an entirely separate new network called ETH2 with completely different clients and everything else. So the thing is, and so ETC inherited a lot of these design flaws. And then we also have a point where we're a minority chain. We're a minority chain in this Dagger Hashimoto environment, which we've already be 51% attacked many times. And in 2019, when Alex proposed the SHA3 upgrade, I was also skeptical about it, and I was also probably one of the most resistant people to it. I didn't shoot it down, but I was resistant to it. I was skeptical. But Coinbase also came out with a great article with how they look at proof of work security, and they kind of go over the same assumptions. When you're a minority chain, you could be 51% attacked. And when you don't specialize in your hardware class, you're very likely going to be 51% attacked. ETCs already has multiple attacks that kind of like prove this. And so it's like, okay, well, what's the vision to become a majority chain? And some people want to do absolutely nothing, wait for the merge fork. Now, some people say, oh, more hash rate is great. It's like, not really, because if you're the only network that specializes in your hardware class, more hash rate is amazing. If you're ETC, for example, more hash rate is why ETC's been 51% attacked over the 4 times. And that's why all these exchanges suffered millions in losses. A lot of miners also suffered a whole weekend of loss of revenue and delisted ETC from their pools. So back in 2019, it was kind of like, well, how are we going to fix this proof of work security problem? How are we going to actually rely on Nakamoto consensus? Because the hash rate now in the merge could absolutely beat the mesh solution. And you don't know how the difficulty and what's going to happen coming to the merge, because even the Ethereum devs are concerned about attacks when hash rate drops and then comes back on. They're scared about 51% attacks on even their own chain, because you have retribution attacks coming to the merge. And in my opinion, as far as the ETC vision and a security vision, it would be nice to decouple ETC from that mess and pursue a majority proof of work algorithm with a better basis of proof of work security, such as SHA3, instead of this really messy Dagger Hashimoto history.
Could you focus on why you think that a chain split is not likely if SHA3 is pushed?
I don't see anyone, at least from the SHA3 people promoting SHA3 in the favor. I don't see anyone saying we have to have a chain split. It's more the other side of the argument, or
that's
some trolls
kind of the point.
Call it ETC SHA3 or call it SHA Ethereum. Besides those toxic aliases on the internet, I love SHA3. I would love to see it for ETC, but I'm not endorsing the chain split.
There is clearly a level of contentiousness with this fork, whether you agree with that or not. Like, we've had many voices here that are against it, and there seems to be obviously an honest debate happening. And if there was an attempt to push a hard fork on ETC for SHA3, then my belief is that it's very likely to cause a chain split. So why would it not?
I mean, there could be some people who don't want it. I mean, after we had the SHA3 dev call, someone launched an attack. So it's very probable there could be retribution attacks for such a hard fork. But if people don't want it because it's contentious, it's like, okay, well, has it been contentious since 2019 because the same mining ecosystem has not favored well for our security. I don't like seeing, and as someone who does dev relations in ETC for multiple years, I've had a close relationship with a lot of the stakeholders. So it's like, so that's why I would say these miners. That's why I think the SHA3 people would say it's good in the long run, and it's actually good for miners and good for ETC as a whole. If we were already pursuing a majority chain, which we could have done in 2019, but that was censored and repressed, all these exchanges would not have multi-millions in damages because of 51% attacks.
Just to focus on this.
So for me, it's about the ETC stakeholders. I know miners want to sell the inflation and everything, and there's a lot of great miners out there, and they have a business. But this isn't just the ETC specific ecosystem. This is the Dagger Hashimoto ecosystem. These are multiple chains. They have other things to mine, and I'm not sure. I don't see the best protocol security with sticking with the Dagger Hashimoto environment.
I think that's all very good points, and the merits of SHA3 are obvious in a lot of ways. But the problem that a lot of people have right now is the implementation and how we get from A to B, and how that's done without causing a chain split. And it seems to me that a lot of the contention against rushing into SHA3 before the merge is that it's ignoring the potential catastrophic chain split event. And I think unless you're genuinely saying you don't think there's a chance there's going to be a chain split, then it seems somewhat irresponsible to be pushing for one, because the result of having a chain split is going to be extremely damaging.
Well, it depends. Let's say SHA3 goes through the ECIP process. Obviously, you're going to have certain ETH hash ASICs that are completely against, and those GPU farms that are invested in their low DAG card, low memory cards. So, and if they absolutely don't want it, it's, I would say, maybe they could mine on a chain split, but if it goes to the ECIP process, let's say it's accepted, and the market determines that that's accepted. And if there is a chain split, I can't speak for what the market would adopt, but I think it has the right support. I would hope ETC Cooperative would support such a thing, as they've supported SHA3 in the past.
So even if there was a chain split,
even
if there was a chain split, you'd still support pushing SHA3.
No, I did not say that. I don't endorse a chain split. So, don't ever say I support a chain split or whatever. But
I'm not saying you support it.
Let's say, even if there is a majority consensus, I still think that there will probably be a chain split, because there's going to be some dude mining the other chain anyways.
So there probably will be a chain
exchange
split.
that actually wants, or there's an exchange that actually wants to endorse that chain. That's kind of their business. But if there was reasonable consensus between the core devs, some miners, and general community people, because I don't think the miners should be the only voters in that decision. You got to think about investors too. And I've particularly talked to many investor groups, some with a lot of whales, and I've actually been on meetings talking about SHA3, and they have interest in that too. They're like, wow, that sounds like a really cool idea. I thought ETC was a lost cause getting 51% attacked. I'm like, well, there's a SHA3 proposal that has a lot of hope and has a new vision here. And a lot of people love that So
Okay, but just to
that's
for the record,
why I would. And if there's going to be a chain split, if someone's like, "Oh, well, it's too contentious," I think that's kind of a cop out. I would like to at least see the proposal rejected or accepted. And if it's rejected, because people want to use that low hanging fruit argument, like, "Oh, it's a little contentious though," and it gets rejected, and all the technical merits are gone. Yeah, I accept a rejected proposal. That's fine. But I think the proposal has to be decided upon because it's been censored and repressed for so long. Core devs in the past were censored and threatened for pursuing such a proposal. So that's why I emotionally feel strong about SHA3 because we knew it was good. We want to prevent millions of damages. We warned the people of influence in the ecosystem about this, and no one did nothing. Multi-million dollars of tax happened. We're warning about the merge fork.
Stev, you can't hear you.
Sorry, okay. I think my thumb slipped off. I'm done talking though. Sorry.
Okay, but just to like summarize with regards to the chain split, you said you think it's likely, or at least there's every possibility for it to happen. If there's some renegade miner.
There's a probability it can happen, but you have to decide. You have to also think within context, because if there was a chain split, it's not a hash rate war. It's not Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin fighting on SHA-2. We're not fighting for Dagger Hashimoto
but that
environment.
Makes it more likely.
And sure they can. Yeah, and sure there'll probably be a lot of GPUs mining, but it's all about the future vision of ETC and having a better foundational proof of work cycle. So even if there was a chain split, it could be on accident. Maybe somebody at ASIC's just trying to do retribution or something. But it's a new proof of work cycle. So it's not a hash rate war. I wouldn't look at the other chain like you're in competition, whatever. As long as it goes through the ECIP process and it's accepted, I think we'll be fine. And also understanding the biases of miners, and I think investors and the community should all be involved in that conversation. And at the end of the day, it'll probably be dependent on co-op signature. So we shall, I guess we'll see.
Henry, can I get your thoughts on the chain split possibility? Are you still there, Henry? I guess he's AFK for a bit.
Let me use the opportunity to talk about a few a few points that have been mentioned in the last few minutes. First of all, that all miners will become unprofitable. That might happen if really a very large amount of hash rate comes in from Ethereum. And also the price situation, the mining revenue situation, stays the same as at the moment. But the difference is not that big. You don't need 20 or 40 times the mining profitability. You need something like 4 times the current mining profitability. And let's not forget that just something like a month ago or so, it was twice as high as it is at the moment. So we will only need to have an increase of mining profitability by a factor of 2 compared to the longer term average. So that wouldn't mean that everybody will be happy, but it would ensure that most of the miners would break even. So it's not that far out of reach. Next thing is the issue of the hardware ramp-up process. And I think this is the point where what has been suggested that SHA3 would start on a new coin, where this would actually have a big advantage because the ramp-up process essentially means also that the whole economic development is synchronized. So the coin starts with a very low market capitalization. It has low hash rates. There are few investments, but there's also very little to steal. So the small coins, when they're starting, they're relatively safe and they can ramp up nicely. And as long as they keep up with their own needs, then things work. So that's a big advantage. The problem with transitioning something like Ethereum Classic is that you have this big ecosystem. I mean, Ethereum Classic may look small if you see oh, it's only number 30 or so in the ranking, but it's a huge system. It's orders of magnitude bigger than many of the other coins people talk about. So it's not a small coin, and there are significant amounts of money that can move around without raising too much suspicion, and this makes it attractive for attacks. So if you're resetting the mining hardware infrastructure, then you're exposing all these assets to attack risk. So the risk is the relative risk is much higher at this in such a transition period than it would normally be. Also, it has been mentioned there were millions of dollars of damage, but let's not forget that at the moment in the ET hash world, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of millions of dollars of equipment, which would be basically destroyed by such a switch. Equipment that is specifically for if ET hash or ETC hash. So there's a lot of damage in any case if something like this happens. Also, it doesn't seem really likely to have to see a repetition of the 51 attacks from 2020 because, well, hash rate is higher, so this raises the bar. Even if there's lots of hash rate around, it creates a massively higher cost. There's mess. The hash rate is no longer easily rentable on places like NiceHash. So that was basically the attack vector. The attack was essentially using NiceHash to attack ETC. Now NiceHash doesn't rent out ETC hash rate, so all this is the easy approach is gone. Could still say rent in the Amazon cloud or whatever, but then you have a completely different system there. And the economics don't quite work like that anymore, and there are probably also more controls of what you're doing. And and also the exchanges may have implemented some additional protections or even have them still in place, like increased confirmation times and so on. But another thing is the FPGAs, the role of FPGAs in a SHA-256 SHA-3 scenario. Sorry. I mean, the FPGAs exist already. The FPGA farms. They can be used for some non-crypto users, or they can be used for mining some new coins that don't have any better hardware yet, and it's profitable for a while until, say, ASICs kick in. But then you could, if we argue that anyone who has no long-term perspective would then automatically attack Ethereum Classic or the coin that they're mining, then this would also mean that for the FPGAs, this would be their exit strategy because they could join quickly. Doesn't take much time to switch them over to a new algorithm, and implementing the algorithm shouldn't be that hard. And then they could push out the GPUs. And when the ASICs come, then shortly before the ASICs come, and then this would be the moment for the FPGAs to do an attack if they were inclined to do so. So again, the same argument works here too. So it basically replaces one sort of attack scenario, which I consider unlikely, but if you want to assess it for the purpose of this discussion, but then you replace it with another one that basically has the same characteristics. So that doesn't quite tilt things in either way. But also we can see that I don't think there have been any such FPGA attacks when they were pushed out of coins. So again, people might be just a bit more honest than the first case.
I guess the one counter to that would be that because FPGAs are general, the ASIC miners on Ethash that are forced to either turn off or attack 51% attack, they don't really have many options, whereas FPGAs can do whatever they want. So it's different in that way.
Yes, that's true. But they wouldn't have any long-term interest in eFirm Classic to function. So they could just do a parting shot. Of course, they still have the risk of getting caught, basically, which they wouldn't have if they just go away without doing anything nasty. But still, if the overwhelming motivation is to do a little robbery and maybe they feel safe from any retributions, then this would be an option. But as I said, I don't think this is a really likely scenario for many reasons. Also, again, you need to coordinate lots of resources and so on, and that doesn't happen. You don't have a global criminal conspiracy or anything of this.
Yeah,
Especially not.
It's hard to mount an FPGA attack, but I remember the network now that was SHA3. So there's an Islamic coin, I believe it's called Mir. They were primarily FPGAs. So we saw that coin grow. I didn't pay much attention to it because it was a smaller coin, but they grew. You saw the hash rate grow. It was predominantly FPGAs, and then they've transitioned their algorithm to, they basically changed the coin. So I stopped following it after they made some changes.
Now we have you back, Henry. I was wondering if you could comment on the potential negative outcome of a chain split if SHA-3 was pushed, and whether you think it's likely, and if it is possible, is it worth the risk?
Yeah. So I think Steph did a good job in terms of outlining a chain split for, in terms of contentious chain split versus a chain split of stragglers. I think there's always a risk of a chain split. The way that I would look at a chain split and say, is, whether the chain split is viable over time. And you see this with Monero. We've seen this with Raven. I believe you saw it with Ravencoin as well. I'm not as familiar with the chain split that happened on Ravencoin. But in terms of Monero, there's always a chain split because people didn't like the change of the proof of work. But what fundamentally happened is that none of those chains survive. Like there's such small hash rates. We saw a chain split on Grin. And that chain split didn't really survive. It's not supported. We saw a chain split in Saya is actually a good example. So you got Saya Classic and you've got current Saya, and the old Saya Classic really doesn't have any volume or any support. Really, it boils down to the people supporting the chain, and how much development effort and support they're getting from the community. And in most cases, you're not seeing that the side chain, if you call it that, it has any momentum. You saw some differences where it's contentious chain split, and those had massive splits. So we saw that recently with Bitcoin Cash. So we split into Bitcoin ABC, which was Bitmain supporting it, and then you saw Bitcoin SV, which was Craig Wright and friends supporting it. So, that was a contentious coin, and, both chains survived because there was heavy development, heavy support within the community. I don't see in ETC's case a lot of people saying, I'm going to support ETC for these reasons, or I got to keep it on the old, proof of work. What I see is the financial community somewhat disinterested in ETC. You look at a company like Grayscale, and you say Grayscale and DCG should be supporting ETC. They made a big donation. They have an ETF that is not an ETF, a trust fund around Ethereum Classic. But they're not supporting it. In fact, recently they've announced a Litecoin trust, and they've stopped donating money to the ETC community. So that shows you, by and large, what's happened. I talk to my friends and miners who are primarily GPU guys, and they kind of mine ETC on the side, but the real weight is in ETH. And they always ask me, well, what do you think of ETC? Can I move my stuff over? And do you see it growing to ETC or ETH rates? So that's kind of my anecdotal evidence on chain splits and community support. So to sum it up, no, I don't see a strong community opposing the fork. You've got some miners saying, I don't like it. And you just got to separate the vocal minority from the future of the chain. And, that's also subject to some opinion as to what could happen.
When it comes from, I used to have a GPU farm, and I use other people who had GPU farms too. A lot of them who are mining, I mined ETC at a loss just because I love the project, but or not, I wouldn't say at a loss, but at a lower profitability that I could mining something else. But a lot of people who in my network that were mining ETC, their primary motivation was to mine ETH, but they went to ETC just to get a quicker payout. So it wasn't necessarily. I guess a lot of those hobbyist to mid-size operations weren't exactly. I mean, you can see here, there's not that many of those miners involved in these discussions and stuff.
Thanks for your viewpoints there. It would be interesting to figure out what the consensus is and what kind of threshold would be needed to ensure that a chain split does not happen. And if maybe there's some approach to doing the fork, like I believe Grin did with a phased transition, that might decrease the likelihood of a chain split occurring. But I guess that's a technical topic. And also, I noticed we're reaching the 2.5 hour mark. Not quite there yet, but I did want to kind of start wrapping up. And if there's any other comments from the audience or participants, please feel free to jump in. But apart from that, we will look to wrap up this call.
I'm happy to stay on if anybody else wants to stay on.
I'm running out of time, but happy to continue the discussion. If we can have a more formalized agenda on the topics, I can prepare some of the numbers in the presentation so we're all talking from the same platform.
I think that's a really good idea, Henry, and I appreciate your input here. It's really good to get both sides of the argument in a format that we can be civil and it's not just text. So thank you very much for your time today.
I appreciate the opportunity. As I said, I want to see ETC grow. I didn't manage to help the Grin cause, so I'd like to help ETC establish itself as the alternative, as the Ethereum alternative. Especially when they go to the transition.
Okay, final call for any last comments. All right, well, that concludes our this week's call. So thanks for everyone who contributed and for listening and sharing this on YouTube. If we didn't cover anything you'd like to discuss, you can always submit your questions and topic suggestions in the Community Calls channel, and we can bring it up in a future talk. Hope to see you all again next week. Thanks, bye-bye.
Thanks, gentlemen. Bye.